Hi, I'm Catherine McClain, and I'm a fiddler. I specialize mostly in Scottish music, but I'm also classically trained and play stuff in the Irish repertoire, old time, and Breton or Welsh tune every now and then.
So classically trained. What instruments are you classically trained in?
Just violin. That is the only instrument I know how to play. My fiance knows a lot more instruments than I do.
What's
Yep,
his name?
Monty.
Bucky?
Yep, he's named after Monty Python.
Oh, excellent. That's fantastic.
I know.
So what was he playing?
He was playing the tenor banjo, which is a four-stringed banjo, and when played in the Irish tradition, it's tuned like a violin in fifths, with the lowest open string being a G, and the highest being E. But in jazz and old time, it's usually tuned more like a viola, but it's also an octave lower than each of those instruments.
No idea what anything you just said meant. That's okay. Maybe somebody else. So now we were talking yesterday a little bit, and you just went. You said you finished a course in Scottish
Fiddling.
fiddling.
Yes.
Where does one find a course in Scottish fiddling?
So, there are many Scottish fiddle schools in the U.S., which I feel like a lot of people in Scotland would be surprised about.
I think a lot of people in America would be surprised about.
Well, with how many Scots ended up immigrating over here between the Jacobite rebellions, the Lowland clearances, the Highland clearances, and then also there was another wave in the 1980s for political reasons. A lot of people with Scottish heritage live in the U.S. and are very appreciative of their heritage and like to keep it alive. Um, and so I go to a fiddle school run by a Scottish immigrant named Dr. John Turner, and the fiddle school is called Jink and Diddle. Alistair Fraser, who's a well-known Scottish fiddler, also has a camp out in like Nevada, and there's also a Scottish fiddle school in Ohio. In fact, I think it's Ohio State. I have a friend who is a professor there, got Scottish fiddle courses to count as credits toward music degrees. So, Scottish fiddling has a lot of attention in the U.S., at least a lot more than people think.
Where was the school that you went?
Oh, Jink and Diddle is held in Valley Crucis, North Carolina. And it's a beautiful, beautiful place. The conference center is lovely. There's also a piping school that is there in earlier July. So I highly recommend that school. I grew up in the culture, and by that I mean my dad was a Highland Games athlete, and so I was going to festivals even as a baby. My mom recently handed out an award in honor of my dad, explaining that she breastfed me in the athletics tent. So I grew up in the culture. I then was a Highland dancer competitively, and then I started doing Scottish. He's having a good time. um. Anyway, yeah, people being people. Anyway, so I wanted to learn bagpipes, so I asked my parents for bagpipe lessons, and they said, "Why would you do something like that?" And I said, "So I can play Scottish music." And they said, "You can do that on violin here. Now go to school and learn in school." So I started learning violin in school, the basics, and then I started taking private lessons with a friend of my fiddle teacher, not my words, with a friend of my dance teacher, who happens to be a former student of Bonnie Rideout, who is a very, very famous fiddler, even won a competition in Scotland and also represented Scottish fiddling in the Edinburgh Music Festival a while ago.
So we all owe your parents a big thank you for not having another bagpipe player.
Well, oh, yeah. Um, yeah, uh, I still would like to learn bagpipes at some point. I love the sound of them. When you hear someone who actually knows what they're doing, bag, the bagpipes are beautiful. They are a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful instrument that doesn't get enough credit, in my opinion. And I will always have that opinion. But I also grew up with listening to a lot of great pipers, so I got lucky. Most people just hear the bad ones.
Yeah,
Um,
I lived in England for a while,
oh,
and we had on the town green, the town I lived in, there was an old boy from the war. It was a colonel or something, I think. And every year on his birthday, his regiment would come out with
oh.
like a bagpipe troop. There must have been like 24 people out there, and they would play for like an hour on the green in this tiny little town. And then when everybody would go to the pub, it was really neat. So yeah, a really good bagpipe player is actually, to be fair, very nice to listen to.
Yes.
So you also said yesterday that you just graduating. You have one more year left here at Virginia Tech.
I actually finished my master's degree last year.
Okay.
I'm still looking for an engineering job. I need to get my resume back out there.
So you're a civil engineer,
Yes.
and what's your master's in?
Construction engineering and management.
Okay. So civil engineer, construction engineer, but Scottish fiddler on the side.
Yes.
Why not?
Why not? It's always good to have, hobbies and passions.
So busking is one of those things that I mean everybody's seen it. How
hmm
difficult was it for you to first do that?
Um,
The first time you
I,
put a hat out and said, "I'm gonna."
I was a little self-conscious at first, but because my first time doing it, I was in an area where a lot of other people were busking, so in a way I felt more comfortable to do it because everyone's doing it. I'm not alone in putting myself out there. So, but it can be a little nerve-wracking at first, especially if you aren't fully confident in your ability. But what you have to remember is you're not getting paid to do that performance. You're just there to have fun and spread joy. And if people want to tip you, they'll tip you. But
You're playing
over,
for beer money.
yeah. I mean, I play for laundry money, but I put those $1 bills to use. I'll tell you what. Um, but no, I busk in part to just share the tradition because I don't want it to die out.
Do you ever like go to schools or do people ever call you up to perform at events or anything like that?
Yes, actually, I have a wedding performance next month. My fiance and I have a gig at a Celtic celebration in Explore Park in Vinton area this month, and I'm competing the first and second weekends of September. One of those being the U.S. National Scottish Fiddle Championship. Um, but last year I had more gigs, um, so yeah, people ask us to do events and whatnot, which is very nice.
How long did it take you to become proficient with something new like that? I
Uh,
mean, is it? Let me start over again. How big a difference is it from classical violin moving, and I may have asked this already, moving over into something like Scottish fiddling?
well, ooh, this is fun because being classically trained is actually a benefit when doing Scottish fiddling because a lot of Scottish fiddling has its roots in Baroque music. That's good. Sorry. Anyway, so one of the differences between what we call classical music today and Scottish fiddle music is there's a lot more freedom in it. So you have a lot of options, and you can choose whatever option you want in the moment, in whatever makes the most musical sense to you. So like, what chords do you want your accompanist to play? Every musician has their own opinion of what chords work best in each measure in a single tune. And there's heavy debates about it when, transcribing collections into a more modern print, which is always very fun. Well, another difference is not only do we have the classical ornamentation, but then we have our own. So we make use of both like Baroque ornamentation, some classical ornamentation, and then piping ornamentation. So we have these things called taps, where we very percussively flick fingers onto the string to separate notes or just ornament them and make it sound more pipey. And drones as well. We can add double stops in order to make it sound more pipey, or just even to accompany ourselves, so we have some backup while we're soloing. And Also, one of the differences is if you go and get a music degree, some professors might tell you anytime you play a fifth or something, Bach kills a kitten. Yes, I have friends whose music professors did tell them this. That is not the case in Scottish fiddling. We'll play thirds and fifths to accompany tunes for those musical people who know what I'm talking about. Rather than like doing other stuff. So we have a lot more like simple accompaniment, but also it can be very particular and in stuff like a strathspey, which I'll get to a strathspey because it's a type of tune peculiar to Scotland. The backup has to be very. It needs to add lift and not be heavy. It needs to be like lighter. And a strathspey is a type of tune with dotted rhythms that mimics Scottish Gaelic. Of course, they're playing that.
If you can hear this in the background, so we are 2 blocks away from Virginia Tech, and there's a band playing Enter Sandman, of course.
Okay. Yeah. So, do we need to pause the interview? Okay. So, anyway, so a strathspey has very dotted rhythms that goes with a dance where the traveling step in Scottish country dancing would be step, close, step, hop. Where in Highland dancing, it's a different traveling step, but it's the same tune type. And there's different types of strathspeys. There's lyrical strathspeys, driving strathspeys, but a strathspey has very dotted rhythms, some of which are also hold on from the Baroque era, because as I said earlier, Baroque music really influenced Scottish fiddling. Anyway, there's a type of bow movement that some of my teachers have called the arrow stroke. A lot of people in Scotland don't like that term. They prefer driven bow. But it's a down bow basically followed by 3 up bows. So you up bow, then you basically do a tie, but still separate the note by adding a little more pressure into the bow, so it sounds sort of like you're playing another note. And then you do a nice little flick at the end near the frog to get that 3rd up bow in. And it's a particular bowing technique specific to the strathspey, very common in driving strathspey, so strathspeys with a lot of oomph.
Awesome.